Believe it is starting. I'm going to try to turn off the transcript. All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's Lunch and Learn. You have joined the program, the webinar, Participating in Trade Shows and Trade Missions, our Export Lunch and Learn webinar. We are delighted that you have joined us today. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm the director of the U.S. Department of Commerce here in Indianapolis. Our job is to promote exporting, and we are the frontline trade promotion agency of the federal government. We work in partnership and close cooperation with the Indiana District Export Council, and you'll be hearing from my colleague Christine Everett in just a few moments. But to put on programming that will benefit the U.S. business community. Our job at the U.S. government and the Indiana office of the U.S. Department of Commerce is to promote the exporting of your goods and services across the globe. We're connected to every embassy around the world, from Argentina to Zimbabwe. We know the territory. And so we want to help you, and we want to be your partner in global success. As many people have heard me say over the years, I believe that international trade is a contact sport. So this is how we contact you and work with you together. And we have an esteemed panel, and it's chock-a-block full of information today for you to learn. We want to make sure everyone knows, again, that it's recorded, and also that please to mute your mics if you're not speaking. I've said that a couple times now, so you've got it, I'm sure. I'm going to turn, without further ado, to my friend and colleague, Christine Everett. She is an Indiana District Export Council member, to kick off the program and to start everything rolling. Christine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Mark. I am super excited to welcome you all today to this Lunch and Learn. And so first, I want to start with a brief introduction to the Indiana District Export Council, or the Indiana DEC. We are a not-for-profit entity operating under the auspices of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we promote and support exporting as a way to strengthen Indiana companies, grow the state's economy, and create jobs. The Indiana DEC provides one-on-one export counseling, workshops, roundtables, webinars such as this, and we serve as a focal point of trade information and export information across the state of Indiana. We are one of 66 DECs across the U.S., and to learn more about us, please visit indianadec.org. I do want to give a special thank you to all of our collaborative partners as well, the U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. SBA, Ex-Im Bank, the Indiana SBDC, Purdue MEP, the International Center, Indy Chamber, and IU Cyber. I'm actually with IU Cyber, and we actually are the IU Center for International Business Education and Research. We're not a cybersecurity center, but we are one of only 16 centers funded by a Title VI grant from the U.S. Department of Education, with the mission to promote U.S. business competitiveness in the global marketplace. That's always a mouthful. Now, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce our session today. We have three amazing speakers who are going to share their experiences and wisdom on participating in trade shows and trade missions. Scott Massey from ANU, Lisa Hudson from Kosovo, and Paul Sims from Weaver Popcorn. Sorry, Paul. So we're going to start first with Scott, and then we'll move on to Lisa, and then we're going to wrap up today with Paul. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Massey from ANU.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning. Can you all hear me all right?
Definitely.
Okay,
Yes,
great. Well, I will share my screen and introduce myself and my company at ANU. ANU is inspired by the Irish goddess of good harvest and fertility, and we seek to empower individuals and communities to grow pure produce, regardless of where they may be in the world and what climate limitations they may be facing. I'm very fortunate to have founded this company 8 years ago following my NASA-funded research at Purdue University, where my co-founder and I contributed to the design of space farming solutions for space colonization missions. I oftentimes compare this field of indoor hydroponic farming to the historical evolution of that of the ice industry. As crazy as this sounds, we used to only get ice once a year when it was cold enough for the climate outside to support the freezing of water. Then we had centralized production facilities known as ice factories that made it possible to produce ice year round, but rarely was it profitable for exorbitant infrastructure and power constraints. And today, we have a decentralized ice making model. We produce it at the point of consumption. I make this analogy because vegetable farming today looks a lot like the ice industry was 150 years ago. We are climate dependent. And if the climate were to say change or the international market not support the climate needed to grow a specific crop type, then the food supply chain would be in for a severe reckoning. We're witnessing a massive proliferation, a growth of indoor farming systems, but much like the ice industry, rarely are these systems profitable due to exorbitant infrastructure and power cost, which severely limits its geographic reach into international markets. But at Anew, we have developed a unique system that is truly modular and decentralized, which predispositions itself very much for exporting. Much like Keurig, we have a non-perishable consumable where operators simply place it inside of the system and allow growth to commence with our fully automated growing appliance. This allows individuals and communities to self-sufficiently grow pure produce while using 99% less water, no pesticides, and no preservatives whatsoever. With an approximate 30-day growth rate, consumers can harvest on a daily basis with effortless harvest from our automated growing system, constantly replacing every harvested plant with a new seed pod, leveraging intuitive consumer behaviors. And while I do make analogies to Keurig often to describe the ease of use and simplistic nature of our consumable business model, which we seek to export into these international markets, I want to really reiterate the Anew commitment to sustainability and well-being of people and the planet. We have gone to great lengths to develop home compostable plant-based bioresin polymers. And this has only been possible with the unyielding support of the National Science Foundation and Connexus through the Smart Manufacturing Readiness Grants, which we were able to leverage to build a consumable manufacturing infrastructure to make these seed pods, which we're planning to export to international markets. These seed pods, once they fully disintegrate, have a very intuitive nature of promoting a circular economy. We have also gone to great lengths to identify seed export restrictions participating in the IEDC's Export Accelerator program, working with various seed export authorities in the various jurisdictions of partners that we've identified by participating in trade shows such as the Consumer Electronics Show. That being one of the most recent international trade shows which we've attended in the past year. Here you can see a quick video. There's no sound, but there is captions showing of our recent attendance at the trade show. Hopefully this video is playing for you all on the screen, but this is actually in the IEDC booth representing the state of Indiana and demonstrating a number of international produce varieties, which we strategically grew for the purpose of this trade show to resonate with some of our partners within their respective jurisdictions. Overall, this was a remarkable experience, and we're incredibly supportive and thankful for the support we were able to gain from INSTEP and other state funding programs to help enable these trade show export activities for us as a business. Now I will cancel out of that video.
Scott,
So,
have you been involved in a lot of trade shows during your curious about some of the trade shows that you may have been to?
Yes, we've gone to a number of technology and food trade shows specifically focused on bringing international cuisine to different markets. That would be more of on our downstream consumer side of the actual systems, but we've also attended a number of international trade shows with seed vendors from around the world. So upstream of our actual business model, building partnerships both within the companies that we source materials from, as well as the partners that we source materials and system designs to. Was a great question. Are there any other additional questions that I can process?
I think what we'd like to hear a little bit more, especially as our focus is trade shows and trade missions, is just some of your experiences as your leadoff batter for this program today. Just a little bit more about how you have experienced the trade show process, ones you've gone to. Did you have a booth? How big was it? Did you take someone with you? These are sort of, I think, some of the questions our audience are interested in, if especially as if they've not had a lot of experience in overseas trade shows, maybe how they differ from your domestic experiences, and just a couple of minutes on those type of topics.
Absolutely. I believe you certainly get out of the trade shows what you put into it. We actually go to great lengths to drive, if at all possible, to these trade shows and bring physical systems with us with plants growing. Now, there are limitations based on international commerce. You can't typically bring living plants across international boundaries without a lot of restrictions. So depending if we are going in person and bringing a physical system with us, we will drive and bring that with us. And it takes a large time and capital investment on behalf of us as the company to do so, but it is absolutely worth it because whatever can differentiate yourself from others at the trade show certainly pays for itself in my experience and the outcomes, partnerships, and sales you will be able to generate as a result. We've also been able to generate a lot of interest through partners through virtual trade shows. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, that's proven to be a viable model as well. I wouldn't say that that's on par with an in-person experience, but if that's able to create meetings that eventually leads to an in-person experience, then it can certainly be worthwhile to attend. As far as booth size, we usually look for the smallest booth possible. We look for something that's most cost effective, as you can have a very high impact, kind of a high intensity impact booth with an appliance that only takes a 2 foot by 2 foot footprint, whereas a much larger booth, which may appear to be more valuable, I have not found there to be any correlation between increased in partnership outcomes and the size of the physical booth's footprint at the show.
Tell us, how does your domestic trade shows, do they differ from your foreign trade shows, Scott? How would you say that has been different? And any tips and tricks for our audience as you prepare to travel overseas at a trade show versus the US?
I think it entirely depends on the nature of the trade show and the specific international market that you are targeting. If it's an electronics trade show, we try and bring handouts or pieces of information that are able to navigate lingual differences. So if we are talking about water installation or electrical installation requirements, we are presenting as quantitative as possible, clear data that is easily digestible in a simple data sheet for potential partners' consideration. If we're looking at a food trade show, we want to be very mindful of the cuisines and dietary restrictions of a specific market. Israel, for example, is going to have obviously a very large Jewish population. Kosher dietary law is something that needs to be observed. If you're going to other places in the Middle East, such as the United Arab Emirates, you must be very mindful of halal dietary requirements. Just understanding the very nuanced details of a cultural cuisine preference can be very significant. I think the United States is probably more open as the potential partnerships in which you may encounter, as you'll find that many travel here. For one example, if you were attending a trade show in Japan, it would be very critical to be mindful of those relationships to be built ideally before the trade show even begins so that you have meetings scheduled. And if at all possible, have a team member or somebody who is a native speaker within the region. We are very fortunate on our team to have two native Japanese speaking team members, which has proven to be incredibly valuable for us.
Well, thank you, Scott, for those comments. We appreciate that. And we appreciate the introduction to your company.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Christine, do we want to move forward? I don't know if Lisa was able to join.
Yes, I apologize. I must have been on a wrong link. I've been waiting to be let in since 11:55, but I was able to pivot and I'm here now.
Glad you're here. That's what we're all about.
I apologize.
No worries. Glad you're here. So we've just heard from Scott talking about his trade show experience. We'd like to sort of move on, different product, different industries, and then so we're trying to get a broad spectrum of experiences. And so you've been on trade missions. You may have been to trade shows. I'm trying to remember. I know you've been on trade missions, but if you could explain a little bit about your company and then your experiences and tips and tricks that folks would like to know about.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'm Lisa Hudson. I am the founder and the owner of Hostel of Workwear. We are actually in the process of right now rolling out a revolution. I started by solving a maternity fire resistant issue, realized women were still wearing men's clothing. We take care of men and women both, but what we really are specializing in, we're hitting the road with an all-in-one head to toe solution for women in not just workwear, but PPE, as well as boots, ensuring that anything that we're bringing, any solution that we're bringing is made for a woman's body, because it's not just about comfort, it's truly about safety. Like our bodies are made differently, and ensuring from literally from our head to our toe that the PPE and the protective equipment and clothing are made for our bodies so that we can ensure the safety. So that's kind of a little bit of background. And I would love to share about, so we did do one trade show in Germany. It was a great experience. We were able to do some business with one of our largest companies, Cargill, when we were there as well. It was, I say, a learning curve, and just because it was kind of our first experience. Okay, what does it look like going forward? So we learned a lot, but I would love to speak more about the trade mission, because for me, I believe that has been so impactful. U.S. Commercial Services literally knock it out of the park when it comes to that. We went to Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica all within an 8-day period. And the great news is that I don't know if a lot of people realize what services are available through U.S. Commercial Services, but the ability to they do all the legwork before you get there. They really seek out companies that are interested in doing business with you. And then when you arrive, they have staff there to translate, which is important. I'm not Spanish speaking, and it's great. They provide wonderful translators as well as drivers that it took us all over. So before we arrived, they had arrangements with these companies that were interested in doing business with us. So then they put out our schedule for us, and we just hopped in and they drove us around, and we got to meet and really make relationships and form business partnerships in all 3 of those countries. And I was just very impressed and would love to continue to be a part of those trade missions. And I would recommend that to anybody who has the chance to.
So tell us, Lisa, just a little bit about, like, you had these meetings, and did someone help you with the translation? And how would you think a meeting with a potential distributor in a foreign country was different than one that of a domestic distributor when you were met them on the trade mission?
Okay, that's a great question. And I think first of all, we ensured that all of our materials were translated before we got there. And we didn't just rely on Google Translate, although it does a great job. We wanted to make sure that someone took a second look at it to ensure that nothing was getting lost in translation, or nothing was getting conveyed in a way that was not appropriate. So I would recommend that. Make sure you have eyes on the translation. So everything that we handed out to them to take with them was translated into Spanish. We also kept that with English. So I would say wherever you're going, make sure you know what languages are being spoken there. For like, we just got back from a trip to Bonaire in the Caribbean. It's an island there, and there is a lot of languages happening there. They speak Spanish, they speak Portuguese, a lot of them do speak English, and the other one is Papiamentu. Like, we learned something new. It's kind of a mix of all 3 or 4 of those languages together. So I think really knowing what languages are spoken so that you can have those materials translated, even if you do have a translator. And as far as compared to domestically, I feel like, especially as a small business, as we scale and are growing very quickly, there's more support for us on the export side. Like they did so much work. And so not only did US Commercial Services do all of that, but like they really did a great job of like finding those business partners with us. And I would say in every country, we met with 12 to 15 different businesses while on those 3 countries in those 8 days. And out of those, we had potential to do business with 11 of them. So they did a really good job. It wasn't like they were just, they just put something on the calendar to make it look like we had something to do. They did a really great job of targeting businesses that were a good fit for us. So I was very impressed with that. So I guess my biggest takeaway is it it's almost easier, and the amount of work that goes into that, they're really kind of hand delivering you the potential for success.
We often say to folks that go on trade missions, for example, just to amplify that, that it's almost like sort of a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout troop. There's safety in numbers. Sometimes you've not been to somewhere before, and you're able to rely on other people, travel with other people, interact with other people. And I've talked to people. I don't know if your experience is true or not, the same, but sometimes people say, "Oh, I met this person on the trade mission. We're still friends. We now are going to do some business together. We learned a lot about each other, and we talked about opportunities." Did you have any of those kind of experiences?
Yes, I'm on a lot of great people that I still am in contact with today. Yes, that is something that definitely happens. And when you're talking about safety, I flew into Panama, Costa Rica, and Colombia. Zach, our intern at the time, who is now a full-time employee after he graduated from IU Kelley School of Business, a huge success story there. He now works for us full-time, but he wasn't able to meet me in Colombia. So I was flying into Colombia by myself, traveling, to the hotel by myself. But I did feel safe because US Commercial Services, they did give us like, okay, if you're coming to this country, make sure that you take that, don't use a taxi here, but don't use an Uber here. So they really set us up for success, that even me coming into a country, by myself on my own, I did not feel overwhelmed. So you're right. I felt very safe. I felt very taken care of. Again, there was a driver for us everywhere we went. I didn't have to navigate. The translators in all 3 countries were amazing. So again, shout out to US Commercial Services for that part too. Like, and I could not stress enough, if you have not done a trade mission, definitely give it a try, because it is truly, they set you up for success.
And I think that that's what people, and we appreciate all your comments, because some folks on the call perhaps have never been. And I think this is a great testimony that you don't have to have a lot of experience. There's a lot of support on the ground. You get to meet a lot of people. You have experiences that you wouldn't have, right? I would assume that you're going to say, in my home market, it's totally different, right? And even the way, I'm sure, in Latin America, in the textile business, you could probably amplify that. They do it a little differently, or their needs are different. What did you find out there that way?
So yeah, that was a little bit concerning, right? There's some other like cut and sew, they're doing some other things, and people were concerned, well, is there really a market for us at first glance? Like, okay, and then realizing, yeah, there is a market. I think what's so surprising for me is, one, I specialize in a lot of like solutions where we're trying to, like, yes, we're trying to prevent people from being burned, but we're also trying to ensure that by protecting from being burned, that we're also preventing heat injury. So all of the research and things that I had was super important to that market. And I think one thing that surprised me, I didn't know, like, whether it's Germany, whether it's the Caribbean island in Bonaire, no matter where we've been, I've always been afraid, like, okay, how are they going to value, are we going to be accepted and welcome? And in every country that we've been in, I've been so overwhelmingly welcome. And like, the reality of it is, especially in the Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, they truly value US made products. And for us, some of the things are being made other places and we're finishing it, but they really value that, the US companies. So, you're kind of going in with an expectation. You definitely don't want to let them down, because they expect you to deliver quality products with quality customer service. But that's kind of nice knowing going in, is that there's already a level of respect there.
Yeah, I think most of the folks on the call, and we appreciate that are attending, believe in the premise that USA products are based on quality. There's a perception that most foreign markets, and maybe we're not aware of because we live here, but in fact, that many people in these countries, the Made in USA moniker and label means something. So you're just a testament to that, and that is part of our value proposition. And we hope that respondents today and participants in the webinar realize that you are a brand USA, whether you like it or know it or not. And it gives you a cachet. And I'm perhaps our colleagues Scott and Paul will talk on some of that too later on in the webinar. But that is a benefit to us, and we bring that brand with us. And we're delighted that the embassy was a support to you and your trip there. Just really to circle back, one more thing before we move forward is to ask. You did it. You've also done trade shows, right? You did one in Germany. How did that differ from the trade mission? And how many people did you take with you to the trade show?
So we took a small team to the trade show because we had other business to do while there. So when we were going to Dusseldorf, we met with the team of Cargill and there as well. So we really kind of maximize. And I would recommend that anywhere that you're going, if time allows, whether it's outside of the country, even, to trade shows here domestically, is figuring out, making the most out of your trip and at least being able to do one sales call or one like customer touch. So that's why we had people with us. And like, it was a good experience to this was a pretty big, it was the Wiener Manufacturing Show. It was a pretty big trade show with a lot of, and we were a small outfit. So it was very much a learning curve for us, but it was just a great experience all the way down to taking a 4-hour trip that should have been 45 minutes to get to the trade show event the night before and realizing, okay, yeah, I'm glad we did this because we would have never made it to the trade show in time if we wouldn't have done this ahead of time. Being in a different country, navigating public transportation, having, our actual like setup to be able to like navigate through the public transportation. And then we did make some connections that were very vital. And that is actually where we met several people in Germany that were really interested in us coming and doing business in Germany there. So as much as I love the trade show idea, and I feel like now we're a little bit further along, that we have a clear vision of like who we are, so we'd be even more successful, but I still don't can't say enough how much the value of just experiencing that first one and being like, okay, this is what we would do different, this is what we would do the same. So if you even that first trade show, if it's not like, okay, we didn't get all these contacts, I think there's so much value to be taken from, okay, just the learning perspective and being like, okay, what did we learn, what could we do better?
Absolutely. I think that you've really hit it on the nail on the head. Many of our respondents today and folks on the webinar probably would shake their head in agreement that you got to try it. There's a learning curve to a trade show, and I think Paul's going to amplify on some of this in just a few moments. But the learning of how to get to this trade show. Where is the trade show? Where do I stay before I get to the trade show? What hotel do I stay in? How far is that away? And how do I navigate transportation in a foreign country to get there, right? Though those are all things that are useful to know, but it's really important because really, frankly, the world is more globalized than ever. And so as Americans, we have to be just like that. We have to go to these foreign markets and be there. I don't think there's any substitute for showing up, for actually being there, right?
I agree 100%. And be okay being uncomfortable. Like that's where we grow, right? Like it's like you could ask my team, in this startup phase and the challenges that we've gone through together. My team, I have an amazing team, and the one thing that the ones, that are on the team now are my forever team. We've all had to be uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, you grow. Be willing to be in those uncomfortable situations so that you truly like grow and learn, so that if you're not growing and learning, your business isn't growing and learning. So I think that's just the thing I can say is be willing to be uncomfortable. For us, we're lost on the wrong bus for 4 hours and we're laughing about it, right? Like we could have been frustrated, but just kind of soak in the adventure of it and be like, okay, we're in Germany. No, things aren't going as planned, but you know what? We're going to roll with the punches just like we do every day.
Flexibility, that's the key, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Let's move on to Paul. And Paul, for you to tell us a little bit more about your company and what you do. And you've been on a whirlwind tour just the last week or so. So tell us a little bit about that and some tips and tricks that you might have for us.
Yes. So hello, everybody. My name is Paul Stund. I'm an export sales manager for Weaver Popcorn. We're one of the largest popcorn companies, if not the largest grower and processor in the world. I actually just got back from a trade show and trade mission, and we're heading to another next month. So if you like, I could just share my screen here. Just one moment, please. Okay, almost there. Thanks, guys. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. No, thank you for the invitation. I just wanted to go over why we participate in trade shows and trade missions, just understanding the difference between trade shows and trade missions, some preparation, tips and tricks, and then, just some questions or discussion. I've been with Weaver Popcorn more than 10 years now. We've been through many, many trade shows over the years in many different countries. There's some obvious reasons why to participate in trade shows. One of them is to showcase your products and your services and really to expand your global reach. It's a great opportunity to meet customers face to face. We have customers in a lot of these different countries, and it does save a lot of time if you can see them at the trade show as compared to, traveling to all the different countries where visiting them individually. It's a great opportunity to maintain your brand awareness and market presence. Even if you have sales in that country currently, it's just really showing your presence and maintaining your brand awareness within the market. And it's another great opportunity to really learn about market trends and what your competitors are doing. So trade missions are a little different than trade shows. They're organized by state and federal government agencies. I just returned from one in Vietnam. It was by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then Food Export USA. They also do a great job with trade missions, just as Lisa was explaining. They include market briefings, throughout the different countries, and just really understanding the local economy. I kind of compare them to speed dating in a way. They do prearranged meetings with qualified buyers. It's really good because they're actually vetting the buyers for you before they get there. So you're dealing with reputable companies, and that they've already been studied and vetted by the government agencies. And another one is a company representation and a delegation. I was fortunate enough to be invited for a delegation with Governor Holcomb to Mexico. And so just, really representing U.S. agriculture as part of that delegation. So they're a little bit different than trade shows. They're both highly beneficial. One is more targeted, and the trade shows would be, kind of more general. So my advice here would be prepared. First you should identify the most important shows for your specific industry. Next month we'll be heading to SIAL in Paris. It's one of the biggest shows in the world for food. So there's a couple of these that we know that they're highly beneficial, impactful. SIAL is one of them. I would highly recommend organizing everything you need well in advance. Brochures, samples, giveaway items. It takes some time for things to be printed and delivered. And then, you should definitely make sure you're working with proper companies for their assistance and documentation to be able to ship and receive your items, especially if you're exporting samples and materials to another country. Things can happen, there could be delays in transit, different lead times, customs clearance issues when it comes to samples or different types of products. And of course, you can have delayed flights, canceled flights. So really just need to plan accordingly and take all of that into consideration. Some tips and tricks that I came up with here, thought about, book your flights and lodging way in advance. This trade show in Paris, it's one of the biggest in the world, so hotels get full and extremely expensive. So the earlier you book things, the better. You can be in a better location, better pricing for your costs for your company. I would also recommend, arriving a day or two early, to set up your booth, to register, make sure everything is in order before the show begins. Once again, things can happen if there's any, if you're missing something or you need to juggle some things around to get everything in place. It's very helpful if you have an extra day or two. A lot of the times you're investing heavily to travel to the country and be there. So, it's definitely worth it to make sure everything is set up. I would definitely consider utilizing exhibitor services for booth artwork and design. Sometimes, in the past, we brought our own things, banners, and stuck them to the walls. Traveling overseas can already be stressful enough, and there are exhibitor services where you can, utilize them to have the artwork done and applied, and it looks very professional as well. So, definitely an option to explore when you're setting everything up. I would once again recommend to take advantage of the government programs that are in place. There's programs for the Food Export Midwest where they will actually reimburse you for cost of participating. And any general costs for marketing. There are programs where you can reach out and they will help reimburse for some of these costs. And then there's a lot of events that are organized for the exhibitors. In Paris, everyone is invited to the ambassador's house and in Paris, which is a pretty neat event they do. And it's also a great opportunity to meet other companies that are exhibiting and, just networking in general. Now I can open it up for any questions if you'd like.
Great, Paul. Those are great slides, and I hope folks, maybe take some notes there because you've opened up a lot of areas of discussion. I think we had one question in the chat, so let's start with that, and we can go back to some other topics as people start to chime in the chat, and we'll address those in the time allotted. A question for all panelists from Drew. Trade shows require a lot of prep and planning. Can you share some insights on success you may have had with targeted pre-show marketing or post-show follow-up? What worked well for you? And Scott, maybe we'd ask you to tee that up and start off with that. If you could maybe comment, and then we'll ask our other panelists to follow suit. Okay, good deal.
Can you please repeat the question? My audio cut out.
Sure. It's a question in the chat. It basically the question is, trade shows require a lot of prep and planning. Can you share some insights on success you may have had with targeted pre-show marketing or post-show follow-up? So what did you do before you got there? What did you do after the trade show to make sure that it was successful?
Absolutely. I think, and this even goes beyond trade shows, but I think something that's very critical for a startup is a strong advisory board, working with individuals who are highly experienced in your industry, and ideally have maybe even been on the other side of the negotiation table that you are sitting on now at the time. Chances are they have a very, very acute understanding of who the market players are and what that share makeup looks like, what brands lead within their respective demographic and psychographic categories, and being able to establish high-level meetings that may not necessarily have been accessible to you on your own. And in the case of a startup that may be approaching commercialization licensing partnerships, you may find that you're one of many approaching these types of partners for those types of relationships. So being able to do your own due diligence in advance and understanding what partners have strategic plans to enter into your respective category is extremely valuable intelligence. And if that can be materialized into in-person high-level meetings when they're at the show, you'll find that many entities have corporate networking sessions, and that's almost always on an invitation-only basis. That can be an incredibly profoundly impactful accelerant to any partnership.
Lisa, what what would you say to the question in the chat? What would be your comment about that?
I just preparation is definitely essential. I think that like knowing, I always like whether I'm going to a trade show or on a trade mission or where Elle and I are flying out to Paris tomorrow. We're going to be in Paris in Belgium to meet Cargill just named us top 30 diverse suppliers across the globe. So we're going to
Hey,
meet.
congratulations.
Thank
Give a
you. Thank
little
you.
clap right here.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
very nice.
thanks. It's exciting, but we're going to meet with not just like Cargill's buyers in this category for Europe, Middle East, and Asia, but we're also the team in Belgium wants to see us too. But then we're also going to be at a conference at Disneyland Paris where there's all of these other companies that are there um, they're looking for other diverse suppliers, right? For like us, that's a target market. A lot of times we're getting in the door because we are 100% women owned. I never like to lead with that, but knowing that that's an added value, it kind of gets us to these large companies. So I share that because what are we doing to ensure, like Elle and I are like, okay, we're not going to Paris like to have fun, right? Like I don't even know if we'll be able to see the Eiffel Tower. We're looking at all of those companies that are showing up on that app to say, okay, oh wait, that's oil and gas. That's a target market for us. Where are our target markets? We're going in and we're setting up those meetings, those one-on-one meetings before we get there. We're also saying, okay, you know what? We have a clear vision of who we are, what we're targeting, what are we going for? Are we going to push our mobile boot store in Europe? Probably not. So we're not going to be taking that material. But what are we pushing? We're making sure that the material that we're taking with us to hand out is relevant to that market. So we're pushing, we're making sure that we're bringing the material that makes sense to the target audience that we are going to be at that. So I think just really being strategic about who you're going to be meeting with, and truly like for us, like we're going to Paris. Okay. The first thing that Cargill did was say, hey, they're going to be in Europe. And like, how do we maximize our time there? We'll go to Belgium, a 5-hour train ride. We'll go here because once we're in Europe, we can reach a lot of people. And again, we didn't have to, but if I can show up in Belgium with a 5-hour train ride from where we are, I'm going to make that personal connection. I'm going to let them know that we are showing up for them and that we're there truly to serve them. So I think that's the best part of being prepared, is just knowing why. Ask yourself, why are we going here and what's our purpose? And then creating everything and prepping everything with that in mind.
That's great, Lisa. Paul, what do you think? What's your comments to pre-show,
Lots
post-show?
lots of good comments by Lisa. Once again, preparation, just making sure you are included in the catalog, for example, have your logo in there. Just all this information, utilize the exhibitor services that are in place. And then I've seen a lot of people, reaching out ahead of time to potential customers or existing customers and letting them know that you will be there, if, trying to set up meetings at the trade show or outside of the trade show. And then just even putting in your email signatures, we'll be at CL in October. Here's our booth number. Feel free to come by. Just really getting the word out there. I've seen lots of people utilizing LinkedIn, which is another good outlet for just really informing people about your presence, and then just making the most of it from there.
We've talked to people at various trade shows and people that are attending them overseas, and we liken this idea to, you can't just stay and pray. So stay by your booth and praying that someone shows up, right? You have to do some prep work before you get there. So that sounds like what all three of you panelists have done in the past, and that it's worked. So I think the folks online today would appreciate that. We have a couple more questions in the chat to keep moving along here. One of them was to ask the question about qualifying leads to deter at the trade show. Just let me scroll up here. How do you collect leads on the trade show floor? Are there methods that you found to be more or less effective? And how do you qualify them to make sure that you're not wasting your time when you're trying to, determine a partner? So, Scott, why don't you start that off and we'll go around the horn. You're muted, Scott.
Sorry about that. That's a great question. I think understanding what restrictions may exist within the market, this is going to be an incredibly specific thing for us as a company. But as we export these seed pods, which by name contains seeds into foreign markets, we need to be very mindful of phytosanitary restriction requirements. I've been able to actually work with some popcorn companies in Indiana and was able to learn about some of the restrictions that they may have encountered shipping seeds into certain markets, and understanding what seeds just flat out may have a restriction, whether it be for an environmental or even a political reason as to why that crop and seed type can't go into that market. Knowing that we are not leading with that specific type of offering is just a really good thing to do, to not kind of lead with your chin, if you will.
Okay, great. Lisa, what do you think? So we're talking about you get trade show leads on the floor, methods you found to be effective to basically follow up with people you met. What do you do?
Yes, this is a good question. And I will say one thing that I learned pretty quickly is, you know, don't just automatically disqualify a lead quickly. You never know. Like really getting a chance to like talk to people and like ask questions, and like even if there are not a lead, there's a lot of times when some of my biggest leads have come through, they're like, oh, I have somebody that's looking for exactly what you're doing. So my first thing is put yourself out there. Really go out there and be willing to like put yourself on the line and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. We love to serve you in this way. And then two, the biggest one is, yeah, they're going to scan your QR code, or they're going to scan your business card, or you're going to give them your business card. Do not stop there. If you're talking to somebody, do not walk away without an email address. Those are like hot leads, right? For your sales team. If you walk away after you've had a conversation face to face with somebody and you don't have an email, if you told anybody on your sales team that, they would probably be very upset with you because you don't want to wait for those people to reach out to you. You want to be the first one to say, hey, it was great meeting you. I would love to see how we could further serve you and your team. And for me, that's kind of my approach at business, and what we're doing too is always lead with like a servant attitude of like, we're here to serve you and to make your life easier. So make sure you keep that attitude while asking for their business card and their contact information. Because if you have that kind of attitude of service and you're asking, they're going to be a lot more willing to give it to you than that you like breathing down their neck, maybe trying to sell something that they're not interested in.
That's a great answer and a great reply to that. The idea of somebody knows somebody, right? That's an unintended benefit of going to a show. Oh, it might not be me, but I know someone else. So there are connections. This is the 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon, right? Somebody knows somebody.
Yes.
And that's an important thing. So I appreciate that. Paul, tell us what you think about this.
So in terms of qualifying leads, the good part about the trade missions is that the leads are generally qualified for you in advance. So that's a real advantage there. A trade show can be a little trickier just because the mass, just the sheer volume of people. But a lot of these trade shows, the FAS, the Foreign Agricultural Service, they will have people at the trade show that are, specialists in their particular area. So they can, I've had situations where I show them a business card and they say, oh, yes, of course, I know this company. It's a very serious company. So, just trying to utilize, once again, those government services that are there, and then just really researching your markets, reaching out to, just researching about the company. Even we do work with third-party risk agencies. I believe Exim is one of the partners here. So companies like that, you can take the company and run their profile through more professional risk agencies also, just to make sure you're dealing with, make sure you're dealing with reputable companies within that market.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's a
Mark.
great comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone's chiming in. Sorry.
Hey, Mark. Sorry, it's Andrew. I couldn't add to the chat for some reason, but I do want to mention real quickly that Roger Howard of the IEDC is also on today's webinar. He's with the IEDC runs the InStep program, which offsets up to 80% of the cost of attending and exhibiting at these trade shows. So Roger, if you're listening, if you can add your contact information into the chat, if you're able to, and also for those interested to search for trade shows by country or by industry, you can do that by going to www.trade.gov/trade-shows. And Mark and Christina, email those if you would be so kind to pop those links into the chat.
And Andrew and Howard both are great resources, as well as Mark as too, like on here. But hi Andrew, it's been a while since we've connected. I've been a bit busy, but these are great resources. Without the Export Accelerator that Andrew led and without InStep, we couldn't get to where we are. So I just want to take a second and say thank you.
Well, Lisa, thank you. That was I didn't ask you to say that, but thank you so much. It was great to have you and Scott.
We see that Roger Howard is on here on our webinar, and in the interest of giving him more exposure even than he has normally. Roger, anything else we missed on the InStep? We're free a chance to plug it on our webinar because it's a great tool for trade shows and trade missions.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate the shout out. I mean, I know I've worked with Lisa and Scott with InStep. Paul was on the ground with us in Mexico City earlier this year. So regarding InStep, I mean, it's available for small companies to utilize. It applies to trade shows and trade missions, but goes even further than that, where it can help with reimbursing the cost of shipping sample materials. I can cover translation. I can cover website globalization compliance. So, I mean, of course, we see it primarily utilized for trade shows, trade missions, which is great. But we have funding. Look for an announcement October 1st for continued funding that we have gained. That more details to be released on that soon. But looking forward to continuing to work with the great companies that are part of this call today, and new clients that I'm sure are on the horizon or maybe listening in today. So if you have any questions, I just put my email in the chat, but look forward to staying in touch or making a new connection. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry,
thank you,
Mark.
Roger.
I just wanted to say thank you to him. And I also saw Christine just pop something up in the chat about IU Cyber. Can I just give a quick shout out to them, because they're the ones who helped cover our expense for a intern to build out our entire international program during the Export Accelerator, IU Cyber. And that was not only were they a part of that success, but it was an IU Kelley School of Business student that we were able to retain full time and keep Indiana talent. So I just wanted to give them a shout out as well.
Absolutely. This is just one big tent here, right? We're all our partners, and it's great to see the collaboration, the cooperation, all the entities. And thanks, Lisa, for that. And for everyone here, you can tell that a lot of folks know each other, and we're delighted to be partnering with you. The chat link has some of the links that Andrew mentioned. InStep is a great program. We want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. It's a tool that you should use to help just supercharge and turbocharge your efforts going to these trade shows. If you thought, well, I just can't afford it, here's a shot in the arm to help you get there. So we really want to make sure everyone takes advantage of it. There is a question in the chat. We want to be respectful of our questions. Ask about registration. What is the registration process to participate as a vendor at a trade show, and how do you apply online to participate? So I'll throw that open. I'm not sure who would want to take that first. This time we'll just sort of round robin it maybe a little bit. Anybody had an experience they want to share?
I think
I'll take this one.
Yeah,
go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, just I think there's a couple different situations. If it's a new show that you don't really have experience participating in, a great place to start is just on their website, reaching out to the organization. And then there are other trade shows that we have historically, participated in every year. Sometimes they're very competitive to get into, so you have the direct contact there. And they do also reach out to you just to remind you that registration is coming. Make sure you register before the deadline or you can miss the space. So really for us, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but yeah, it just depends on which is the situation, but definitely the organization website is also a good place to start.
Lisa, you had a comment.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The same thing. Do your research online, dig in. You can even find reviews for the trade show. Try to get some feedback. Look into Google reviews. Just do your due diligence as much as you can online, and a lot of the registrations are right there. And I just saw Eric's on here. I would not be fair by saying, hey, thanks to Eric and the SBA with their export loan. Like really my team of people to help me make it to where we are right now is on this call. So make sure you I want to add Eric and the SBA to my list of thanks, and make sure you guys use these resources.
And we want to make sure everybody knows we did not pay Lisa to say all these things. So yes, that's great. SBA, another partner of ours, Eric Armacost and Lindsay and Stacy, all the folks at SBA, they're great partners, great tools. These are all important partners in the process of the export mechanics, which is what this program is about today. And I think the question and the answers from our panelists are really insightful here, because you need to make sure that you choose the right show. I think this is a thing that all of our three panelists have mentioned, being thoughtful about, hey, make sure you got the right one. Is it in the right sector? Is it in the right space? Is it well known? Do they have a great attendance? Is it affordable? And can I get a good booth? Sometimes, you can get a really lousy booth at a good show, and that's not always so great. And also, we tell folks many times in preparation for trade shows to maybe before you actually exhibit, there is a potential sometimes to walk the show if you're not sure, because sometimes it's like, this is a lot of money. Well, there may be a reason for you to walk the show in advance of that show before committing hard dollars and saying, oh, this is the place for me. And I think all the tips and tricks that our panelists have given us have been really, I think, helpful to us today. I'm making sure that I look here and make sure there's no other questions in the chat. So
Mark, I think you make a good point really quick to say about walking the show. Don't underestimate that. If you don't have the money to set up and you don't have the money to put out there, don't underestimate the ability to walk a show with your stuff in hand. You can still talk. You can talk to even more people. You can stop at every single booth. You don't have to wait for people to stop and talk to you.
Absolutely. I think these are great things to think about, as far as prepping and being ready. I think the overarching message for our webinar today is be involved and go, right? I think if our panelists would probably give you any message, you can do it, right? You can go, you can be a part of these overseas trade shows. You've heard all our panelists give a shout out to many of the resources to sort of buttress your efforts and give you a helping hand to get there. Hopefully this webinar is an incentive to find that trade show or that trade mission, because our panelists have been talkative about how beneficial trade missions can be. And you get to go as a group, you get to go with other people, you meet candidates along the way. And so these are really important things. Just to recap a couple things, panelists also mentioned the ability to do other work while you're in a country. So you can do other work while you're there. So that's meeting in advance of the show. I think Paul mentioned earlier about getting there in advance. That's actually a big deal. I've been to a lot of trade shows over the years, and you don't want to come in at the last minute, because unfortunately it's not always perfect, right? I've had our panelists would shake their heads to say, yeah, it's not always smooth. My banner's not up. My name's spelled wrong. I went to a trade show one time with a company, and I was at the trade show. They spelled their name wrong on their booth, right? So that wasn't great, we had to scramble to get their name on the banner reapplied. Well, if you don't get there until just before, this is going to be a panic situation, right? So there are so many things, and I think I want to make sure we've just got a minute probably to go. But if any other questions in the chat I don't see, I'm
Mark.
going to. Oh, there is one.
Hey, Mark, I really wanted to add to what you said in finding ways to mitigate trade show cost. A lot of shows have panel discussions, competitions, kind of non-conventional opportunities. If you contact the organizers, you may have an opportunity to effectively have a speaking spot at no cost or very little cost. And in many instances will include free admittance to the show. And I have found that a speaking panel opportunity may be even more impactful than having a booth there. That if
great.
you have the opportunity to actually captivate the audience for some period of time, introduce yourself, your company, your services, your brand, that can be extremely valuable both at the show and any press releases, marketing assets that may be created following the show's end.
No, that's great. That's sort of a hidden tip or trick that you might not have thought about being on the dais, because you have an expertise that somebody might want to hear about. And it's a really nice way to do that. So thank you, Scott. That's a great
Yeah, thank
tip.
you, Scott. That was a great idea. Hadn't thought of that one. Beautiful.
In the chat, Eric mentions tech-centric events also have new product tech showcases where you can sometimes do a pitch. This is sort of what Scott was talking about here. So these are things to take advantage of. In the interest of time, because we're right at the top of the hour, I'm going to turn it over to either Christine or Andrew, one of the two, to talk about our next DEC webinar, Lunch and Learn, that's coming up for us in the month of November.
Sure. I was going to post that, but wasn't able to add it to the chat. So the next webinar is in November 21st, and that's Trade with Japan. And the link is up on the DEC website, indianadec.org, future events and future events. And I just really want to add my thank you to Christine for organizing the event, also for the excellent content provided by Scott, Paul, and Lisa on trade shows and trade missions. Thank you very much. This will also be appearing in the DEC website past events. So if anybody wishes to review this, they can.
Well, this has been a great program today. We want to say thank you to our presenters. I think the dialogue and the discussion has been really impactful. We've had a nice flow of information. And thank you to everyone that has joined us. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks, of course, to our DEC members, Christine, and other DEC members who may be on the call who we are not aware of right this moment. And of course, our esteemed DEC chair, District Export Council Chair, Andrew Reinke, who leads us. And we appreciate everyone being on the call today. And we hope you have a great day. And thanks for joining us again. Goodbye now.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark.